Greetings. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks Sr., your host, and this is Community Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an outstanding guest with us, Dr. Thomas A. Rudd, former Lake County coroner. Matter of fact, 2012 through 2016. He left office November 30, 2016. Greetings, Dr. Rudd.
I'm glad to be here.
We're very happy that you've taken time literally from your busy schedule to be with us. This will be the last show in the studio for Channel 17. Really, the studio is moving to, I think it's Elk Grove Village. But the shows still will be on Channel 17, but they will not be in this building. So we're very happy. And I remember the days when Attorney Kevin O'Connor and Ralph Peterson, we had regular shows. I think we had a case in North Chicago that you may want to talk about it later on. But what I want to do is start off by having you give an update of your activity since you left the position.
Well, it could be a very long story, but I'll try to reduce it to a short bullet point.
Okay.
As you said, I left in November 30th, 2016. And February of 2017, the state's attorney decided to indict me on 5 counts of signing petitions that I did not circulate. This was confusing to me because when that was pointed out in December of 2016, and I found out that what I did was an error, which I thought was legal, I withdrew my candidacy, which should have ended the process of getting on the ballot. Remember, the process is gather signatures, turn them in, get on the ballot, get voted in or out. I aborted that. It should have ended my process. So I said I did a wrong, and I stepped down, tried to run for coroner as an independent, but the powers of the Republican Party went after me for that and threw me off the ballot for that. So now, in February of 2017, I'm looking at an indictment that'll give me 10 to 25 years for a clerical error. The state's attorney felonized a clerical error. So, long story short, I knew what they wanted. They did not want me to run. So I said to my attorney, ask them how many years and get me a misdemeanor, which is what it was. And they came back with 7 years, starting in 2017. So that means I can't run to 2024. So the interesting and important point is that it's a misdemeanor. There is no perjury charge. It's a misdemeanor to election code. Okay, it's equivalent to speeding over a large amount of miles per hour.
Okay.
So that's where it's been. Now, here's the interesting point. I decided to bargain for that because I could see the J.B. Pritzker train coming down the line. I knew he was going to crush the governor at the time, Rauner. So I said to my attorney, we'll apply immediately for a pardon, which I think he should grant because he's a Democrat and I'm a very good Democrat. And I will run again. Well, on July 11th, I had my pardon hearing of 2019, and I got word that the Prison Pardon Review Board gave me full clemency. All we needed was Governor Pritzker's signature.
Okay.
And I found out that certain party officials did not want me on the ballot, and they told Pritzker to block it and not sign it.
Wow.
Yes. So I was quite upset. And the way I found out is that several members of the Democratic Party leaked to me that individuals, high-ranking officials in the Democratic Party of Lake County was blocking it. And I actually engaged a private investigative agency who confirmed it. Now, when I say investigative agency, I'm not talking about a lawyer that follows wandering spouses. The firm that I got investigate corporate misdeeds. So these individuals who do these investigations are lawyers, some are ex-CIA, ex-FBI, high-power firm.
Okay.
And they confirmed it without a doubt that that two leaders in the Democratic Party, one a state senator and one the head of the 10th Congressional District organization, went to Governor Pritzker and said, please pardon this, please block this pardon. And so the question is why?
Okay.
And from my understanding, these individuals only want female candidates. You've heard of the word misogyny. That's when men treat women bad or dislike women. There's an opposite term, which a couple of members of the Democratic Party, I feel I can label. They're called misandrous. That's misandry, women who dislike men. Okay. The other thing I found out is that the tentacles of the current state's attorney wrapped around several elected members of the Lake County Democratic Party. And he convinced them to block it because they said he's not trustworthy. I'm not trustworthy, I said. So when I pursued that, I found out what they meant by that is that he always tells the truth. You can't trust him if you need a favor.
Okay.
Okay? That's what they meant.
Okay.
The other reason is, and the one that hurts me the most, is they didn't like my relationship with the minority communities. They didn't like the fact that my support came from the black and brown communities, as well as some members of the white community that don't have any power.
Now, you found that to be true about the black community?
Yes. I'll tell you right now, there are some members of the Democratic Party who've been threatened because of their relationship with the minority communities, have told, you're supporting too much, back off or we'll run somebody against you.
Wow.
Okay? Obviously, I can't name names, and that's always bad when you discuss something like this, because how do you know I'm telling the truth?
Yeah.
If I told you the name, that individual would probably have somebody run against them. Okay, so there are certain members of the Democratic Party who have been threatened. Let's look at the demographics. Let's look at the demographics of this county. Approximately 10% of the population is African American. Over 20% is Hispanic.
Okay.
We don't have one board member of Lake County who is Hispanic.
Okay.
We have 2 African Americans. We have, as far as I know, no mayors who are Hispanic.
Okay.
Okay, so the representation is minimal. There is no state rep who's Hispanic. We have one black state rep, Rita Mayfield. We have no state senators that are black or Hispanic.
Okay.
We don't have any U.S. rep or United States senator who's black or Hispanic. Okay.
Locally, you have Hispanics in Waukegan, don't you, on the city?
That are alder persons.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yes, that may be true, but not one Hispanic mayor.
Okay.
Okay, not one state legislature. Makes no sense. A third of this county is minority. Why is that the case in elected officials? The powers to be dislike anybody who stands up for them.
Okay.
I was hated because I stood up for Hannah. The police treated me terribly. I was hated because of Justice Howell. I was hated for Kalazinski. And I was especially hated for Lieutenant Glinowitz in Fox Lake. Okay.
Amazing.
All right, because I would not call that cop a hero. And I was quite scared during that time over that one, because I made some very minor statement to the press as to the manner of death. And I said, I don't know what it is. I don't have any evidence.
Undetermined?
I said, no, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a homicide, suicide, accident, undetermined, or I know it's not natural because there's a bullet in them. But the point is, I need some evidence to call it.
Okay.
Next day, they issued a press release saying, by my talking to the press, I jeopardized the case.
Oh.
right? I jeopardized the case. And that, of course, turned out to not to be true. So you pay the price if you're honest. The old line, which I used to laugh at, it turned out to be true: no good deeds go unpunished. All right? And so my own party is blocking my ability to get on the ballot. And it would be one thing if they replaced me with a qualified candidate. But instead, they chose a registered nurse who has no experience in forensic science or death investigation. Nurses are a very valuable and important member of the healthcare team. But the coroner's office, by definition of what it does, is a medical laboratory, which is the practice of medicine. It does autopsies, and it does body fluid analysis, and it does forensics as DNA and ballistics. No nurse, especially this nurse, has any training whatsoever in that area, and yet she thinks she's going to walk in and do the job. And it's not going to be the case. All right? It is ludicrous to think that they're going to put that person in and think that that office is going to be run correctly. And what's even more bothersome, that the community should know that the current coroner and this Democratic coroner, if she was to get in, are two-timers. And what I mean by that is they are collecting a check for over $130,000 a year, and the current coroner works 4 days a week in his dental practice. He only works 2 days a week in terms of hours put in. The individual who is the registered nurse happens to be a nurse practitioner in a specialty of anesthesiology. So she's a nurse anesthetist, but can only practice under a board-certified physician anesthesiologist. She is making, it's estimated, I don't know, anywhere from $160,000 to $200,000 a year. Now, why would somebody give up a $200,000 job to work for a $130,000 job? I'll tell you why, because she does not plan on giving up that job. She's going to appoint somebody below her to run the office while she's passing gas.
Now, you mentioned this, and I would like to know, are there certain qualifications that you need to run for the coroner's office? Maybe there are two things.
Yeah.
One is running for the office, and one is, been placed in the office.
Unfortunately, there are minimal requirements to be a coroner, and that is having a high school degree
Okay.
and no felony records.
For a coroner.
Yes. And that's why they went after me, because they wanted to convict me of a felony so I couldn't run. Okay. So that's it. High school degree, no felony. Now, why such low requirements? The very simple reason. If we've got 101 counties in Illinois,
Okay.
how many counties, therefore, are there in the United States? I think there were between 4,000 and 5,000. I can't remember, but it's about 4,000. There are only 500 pathologists that can fill that slot, and you've got 4,000. Therefore, there is not enough forensic pathologists to run the office of coroner/medical examiner.
Okay.
So your large cities, Chicago, New York, Cleveland, they have a medical examiner. And the reason they do is when they had a coroner system like Cook County, it was totally corrupt. Totally corrupt. You could buy your cause and manner of death. Just slip the coroner some money and you'll get your answer. Okay, and that occurred in this county too, before I got in. Somebody had an accident, somebody would have a suicide. Back then, a long time ago, insurance policies would not pay for suicide. Well, if you handed the coroner a pretty penny, that individual would make it an accident, and you'd get your insurance, and she'd get a cut of it. Okay, coroner system is by its nature open to corruption. Okay, because it's not a physician who can lose his license. When you have a physician who can lose his license, he's not going to take a chance generally.
So that's the reason that they wanted you out of the office Not only that, but in a position where you cannot run for 7 years.
Correct. Correct.
Now, I'm concerned too, the pardon was under governor's desk to be signed. And because of the, contact he had with females, he wouldn't sign it.
Correct.
He was looking at it politically.
Correct. And let me just give you a brief synopsis of that time period. July 11th, I have a hearing.
Okay.
2 weeks later, I am informed by a highly reliable source who shall remain unnamed that the board gave me a full and complete clemency. And you could see that at the hearing. The questionings that it was coming to my lawyer, by the way, Rita Mayfield was there helping me out.
Okay.
The questions that were coming to us were obviously being viewed by the 5-member board as positively. So 2 weeks later, I am told that I got the pardon. Okay. I know some individuals who are very close to the Pritzkers in terms of working businesses that deal with them. They've told me, yes, he's going to sign the pardon. August 30th, somebody calls me up and says, there's going to be a 4 p.m. news conference. Pritzker's going to announce pardons. I pull off the road, turn on WBBM, and he announces a single pardon. And it isn't me. I immediately was suspect. That weekend was Labor Day. I get wind from sources within the Libertyville Township Democratic Party that they're going to run this nurse anesthetist for corner. And I go, whoa, what's happening? So I contact certain elected officials. They call up the governor's office and they confirm that the pardon's sitting there. The elected official says, put it on top. Okay. Several days go by, nothing. I call the pardon review board.
Okay.
And I said, is my pardon into the governor? Because now I'm doubting it. And they said, we can't tell you if you're the individual, but we'll tell you this. Everything decided on has been submitted to the governor.
Okay.
I have a newspaper reporter 2 days later confirm it. I have a lawyer 4 days later confirm it. And it's now not being signed. And then I go to a Democratic meeting and speak on September 19th. As I'm leaving, a source close to this individual who runs the 10th Congressional District says, she stabbed you in the back. Your pardon is blocked.
Oh my God.
I get in the car, I get another phone call. Different individual. Tells me the same thing from the meeting. I get home, I get a phone call while I'm home. I hire, as I said before, I had hired a high-grade firm of investigation. On the next day, they call and say, we have confirmed that this individual in a state center has blocked your pardon. I confront that individual. And for 2 hours, this individual spews the most vile, vitriolic, vulgar language at me. Allegedly, denying it. Now, why would somebody spend 2 hours swearing at you if it's not true? Most individuals say it's not true, and I don't want to talk to you anymore. Get out of here. No. That individual swore at me for 2 hours, and I wondered why, and then I realized that individual is trying to get the source. They wanted to know who ratted on her. And of course, I'm not going to give it. Okay? So then, I contacted the chairman of the Lake County Democratic Party and said, I need help. It was like September 25th. I tell the individual, I need help. He says, luckily I brought my lawyer with me, don't worry, Tom, I'm meeting with Pritzker next Monday. This was on a Friday. I'll get him to sign it. And what do I find out? That the chairman of the Lake County Democratic Party, an hour later, gets on a plane, goes to Florida, and never sees the governor. So I sent him emails from 9/25 to October 11th, asking where is it. He doesn't have the guts to call me. He calls my lawyer and says the governor doesn't have it. We know he has it. We confirmed he has it in early September. So he lies to me. And that's where it ended, as far as I'm concerned. I don't get the pardon, and we're now having the most unqualified individual to run the office.
There's no question about your qualifications, but let's just touch on them a little bit. We won't go into detail because it'll take a whole
week.
For each one. But tell us about the cases that you had to prove that you have to have the qualifications. In other words, if you didn't have the qualifications, these cases would not have been resolved, right?
Here's some key points. I'll keep it simple. And I'm glad you brought up the 4 cases. Let's deal with the Hanna case.
Okay, that's North Chicago.
That's North Chicago. A gentleman about 45 years old, unfortunately addicted to drugs and multiple natural illnesses, diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. He is have a fight with his live-in girlfriend who's pregnant, and cops come in, he resists, they restrain him too much, they beat him to death essentially, he dies. I'm contacted by Kevin O'Connor and Ralph Peterson, say, if you get an office, we review it. And I said, I will review it, but I call it the way it is. I'm not guaranteeing you a result. Now here's what I had to do. I had to review the chart, okay? I reviewed the chart, I saw the chemistries. Remember, they called it undetermined. They said, we don't know if it's his cardiac disease, we don't know if it's drug addiction, we don't know if it's his renal disease, we don't know if it's his endocrine disease, we don't know what could have killed him.
Well, that was a former coroner that was a prior
Chief of Police of Waukegan.
Chief of Police of Waukegan,
That's
right?
correct, that's correct.
So he's the
Right,
one.
now here's the key, because the other cases will be dependent on this too. The forensic pathologist that they hired to do the autopsy was as corrupt as the cops.
Oh.
He shall remain nameless. He would go basically to the coroner or the state's attorney and says, what do you want for an answer? And he gave it to him. He said, tell him it's undetermined. Well, the first thing, now I enter and I have a pathologist who I find out works for the state's attorney in his mind. So when I gave him the data and say, look, this is the real cause, he said, I'm sorry, I disagree.
Okay.
Now, this nurse practitioner, what is she going to do when she gets in? And she has to challenge the pathologist. And she doesn't know, as I did, to read the slides, to order stains, to submit tissues, to examine the blood work, and figure out from the blood work where on the slides the pathology is. Because he had rhabdomyolysis. And the chemicals that break down, go into blood, go into the kidneys and shut the kidneys down. Does she know where to look on that slide, where that kidney damage should be to confirm the abnormal lab findings? No. So I changed it. Next case.
Okay, next one was the Kalazinski case.
Here's another one.
That was the Lincolnshire.
Right. Family contacts me and the lawyer, Paul DeLuca and Paul Kalazinski. Said my daughter's frame. All right, so I pull the slides out, and they say it's an acute injury, recent bleed on the brain. I pull the slides out, I pull the photographs out, and instantaneously, it screams chronic injury, not acute. So I'm looking at the history. Then I find out the child had suffered a hit to the back of the head 6 weeks prior to he's died, and Melissa, the defendant, had not been hired yet, so they couldn't pin on that. So I'm looking at the slides, and I'm saying, this is an old injury. How can they read it as acute? So what do? I go back to the tissue, I pull out new tissue. Would the nurse know the difference between brain, lung, heart, et cetera, to submit? Then I ordered special stains to confirm that it was old. Does she know what stains to order that it makes it old? I ordered it not only on the new tissue, the old tissue, and the previous tissue from the previous pathologist that was brought in for the court case. So we had 6 different examples of study that I read, confirmed that it was a chronic injury, went to this pathologist again and said, would you look at this? I think we made a mistake. He refuses to look at it. And again tells me, he works for the state's attorney. Now, what would this nurse do then? I'd like to know what she would do. What I did was, we issued a new report. We got new findings. But I also went to the other pathologist who initially did the first autopsy, sat down with him. He agreed that a mistake was made, and he signed an She could not have done that. Next case.
Okay. Police officer shooting Fox Lake.
There's a situation where everybody is making a decision that it is a homicide. And the first thing I noticed on that day was it was a hot, humid day. We knew an officer was shot. I thought the best thing for me to do was to stay in the office, start handling the phone calls, because we knew it was going to come in. I sent my 2 best investigators out. Absolutely rock solid. They went out there. They did a great analysis. They brought the decedent back. First thing I noticed was this officer was in roll call order of his uniform. There was no struggle. The shirt wasn't pulled. Nothing was torn. Little mud on the knees and on the shoes because he was in a swamp area. The mud on the knees means he went down after being shot. But there was no struggle. Now, there was some scratches on his face, which we subsequently found out when I went out afterwards to investigate the scene, that it was thick with brush, so he was scratching himself. So I'm thinking, how does a guy get into a fight and not have any struggle there? Okay, and the reason I say that is that the gunshot was 2 inches below his vest, so the individual had to be close. There's no way you can aim a gun from a distance and have it go under a vest 2 inches without him being perfectly positioned. Okay, so we knew it was close up. This gentleman, this officer, was also an Army Ranger, who, if you got near him with a gun, probably would take your throat out with his hand. So there was no struggle. The bullet was underneath the vest, and the transition was at 45 degrees, which means the gun went under the vest like this. How does somebody get up to an officer and shoot him? Immediately, I suspected it was a suicide. However, I had to be 100%. So I waited, and I waited, and I waited. Where's the evidence, Major Crime Task Force? And they're dilly-dallying around because they know the truth.
Okay.
And without belaboring it, they knew his past record of sexual harassment. They knew his past record of alcoholism. Okay? They knew a lot about him. They knew about him running guns to the gangs. They knew him participating in drug trade. That never came out. There's another reason they had to get rid of me, because he was dealing with drugs and he was selling weaponry to the gangs.
Wow.
And it only broke because the FBI finally said, we're not going to take this any longer, and went to the Crime Task Force and threatened to put them in jail if they didn't come up with the truth.
Last case. Justice Howell, Zion, Illinois.
This is a young man who allegedly went to buy a gun. Now, here's what's interesting. He went to buy a gun behind the police department. How many people buy a gun, an illegal gun, half a block from the police station? Okay? All right. Long story short, apparently a scuffle occurs in the purchase. They say, the law enforcement, that Justice took the gun and wouldn't pay for it and try to get away, and the gun goes off and he runs away. And they say he turns to shoot the officer, and that's when the officer plugged him. All right. We go to court, federal court. There's no DNA or fingerprints on the gun of Justice Howell. There is some DNA at the clip, but the actual holding the gun and shooting it has no DNA or fingerprints of Justice Howell. Or worse, there's no DNA at all. What does that mean? I'd like to know what the nurse thinks that means.
Okay.
What it means is it got wiped. All right, and I used the ballistics. He got shot here for once, and here, and the spleen, and hit the spleen, liver, heart, and lung. And the only way it could have done that way was when he turned. So what happened was he got shot in the right shoulder before he turned. Before he turned, he got shot in the right shoulder. The shot came from the left. It caused pain, and he turned to look. And then went at that angle, and he dropped. Here's another important thing. That deceased individual is mine. not the cops. They secure the scene. They put the handcuffs on him, make sure he doesn't try to grab the gun. And a second cop is standing over the first cop with a gun at the kid's head. And they don't call me in to look at the deceased. There's no pictures of the deceased at the site with the gun. None. They take him to the hospital so I don't get to go to the scene and question the officer, who found the gun? Where was the gun? I couldn't ask that question because they moved the body. They take a single picture of the gun in his phone, but not with the decedent. We go to court, we lose. I don't know how we lost. We lost. Despite the fact the gun had no DNA. Remember, they claimed that he stuck it in his belt under his shirt. So he's rubbing his belly against the gun. There's no DNA? And he pulls it out to shoot the officer. There's no DNA? It makes no sense. Unfortunately, the jury didn't see it that way.
Your grandmother, Spencer's grandmother is
Alice Howell.
Alice, is never given up on this. She's still...
No, we have a benefit once every year on the date he died, April 4th, 2016, I believe it was. And so there is a benefit coming up, and if anybody wants to come, just go online and dial in or Google FOCUS, F-O-C-U-S, and that's the acronym for the Justice Hall dinner.
Let's move along then to marijuana. Now, is marijuana as safe as we think?
Marijuana is not safe. Let me just preface this, okay? Because I'm coming across as a prude on this. I've written to the county board. All right. I come from humble beginnings. My grandfather was a bartender.
Okay.
I was born and raised in a bar.
Okay.
I waited the bar for him. I was the bouncer in the bar for him. Okay. I had my first drink from my grandfather at age 2.5. He used to give me beer, unknowns to my mother.
Okay.
And if I had a terrible cold, like a flu, my grandmother would take a bottle of Rock and Rye, which was a liquor with a peach at the bottom, and wet her finger and then put it on my lips and all this. I was out.
Okay.
But I stopped coughing and I stopped sneezing, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not a prude. There are no studies whatsoever showing the proof that it is a medicinal benefit. None whatsoever. Why?
This is
Why?
what they use, yeah.
Why? Because it is a class 1 drug, which means if you want to do any studies, you must contact the federal government to get that drug. And to do any study, you must quantify what is in there. What is the percent of it? You know, what is in this marijuana? And then you run it by thousands of people to figure out if it's beneficial. Never done. It's all anecdotal. It's all anecdotal. We know that it causes people with mental illnesses terrible times. They get worse. We know they get people with mental illness that use marijuana also have a 50% increase in violent behavior. We know it drops the IQ by 8 points. We know, this is what gets me, we're hearing from people that it's not as bad as cigarettes. It's not as bad as cigarettes. Cigarettes have a filter, number one. Number two, the dope heads that use it inhale it and hold it as long as they can, so you're getting in way in for a longer time.
Okay.
Okay? The same hot tip that burns a cigarette and burns marijuana, the same dangerous tars, nicotines, and chemicals in there are being deposited in your lungs. And we know if it doesn't give you lung cancer, the second order, or the second organ that affects the most is the renal system, where you either have to have a kidney out or worse, a urinary bladder out, because that's where it causes cancer also, not only lungs. And it's a horrible death. So for them to propose that, now let me give you one more example. Everybody says, oh, you're being mean, these people are dead. Guess what? Nothing of that, you never hear this. There are 3 drugs out there that come from marijuana that the United States government studied. There are 3. And they reduce nausea, they increase appetite, they give you well-being. They're out there. They've been out there for decades. Why all of a sudden do you have a drug that can take care of the problems you want these patients to have cured, that you don't use these drugs? Here's the problem I've heard from clinicians. They give the person the drug, they come back complaining. And he goes, what's wrong? He says, is your nausea gone? Yeah. Is your appetite increased? Yeah. Are you feeling better physically? Yeah. Well, what's wrong? I'm not high.
Okay.
I'm not high. So what is the real reason they want that medication? Is to feel better or to get high?
Wow.
Okay? It's bogus. And the only reason we're doing it is because we have a bankrupt state that needs taxes. That needs the taxes. Okay? We'll make more tax money selling this stuff than we collect with corporations.
Amazing.
Corporations are worried about socialism except for themselves. When the government gives corporations money, that's not socialism.
Okay.
Okay? It's bogus.
Wow. Wow. Moving along. What about condemning Civil War days? We've been reading a little bit about that in the papers.
I wrote 2 articles to the board. First of all, we should never glorify war.
Okay.
Okay? That's what it does. You've got fat old white men, and some slim white men, and even some minorities, running around like children, aiming guns, shooting, having people fall down, cannons going off, and then all of a sudden everybody gets up and they're all happy and they go have some drinks. What are you teaching your children? What are you teaching your children? That shooting and killing is okay because guess what? Nothing happens, you get up. But more importantly, you fly a treasonous flag. The Stars and Bars is a treasonous flag, and it's been accepted by the most virulent, vitriolic racists in this society, going back from the end of the Civil War days into the 1920s. And some of the most virulent groups have adopted that flag. And some of these groups actually joined the German-American Bund in World War II as traitors and attacked Roosevelt. Okay? So we had traitors, German fifth columnists, accepting that flag as theirs. And now you had Strom Thurmond accepting it. You should never fly a treasonous flag anytime. And I said that. That should not fly in Lake County. It's a treasonous flag. And these people that adore it, adorate it, think the federal government should not exist. That's wrong. That is wrong. And I said so.
Wow. Let's go to, there's a lot of discussion still about Obamacare. What is it about Obamacare? Isn't that saving on health coverage?
Well, what it did was it covered a lot of people that had not been covered. Okay, but the problem is that it's still based on the private insurance companies. And they can raise the prices of the care. So if you're making $30,000 a year and you're forking out $5,000 for Obamacare, you're going to go into debt, okay? And so what we need is a Medicare for all. I'm a big proponent of that. I wasn't that way when I started out my practice. However, having seen and worked as a physician, it's gotten to the point where you can't afford your own health care. It's impossible. I'll just give you an example. I had an MRI of the abdomen. It was $8,000 for a simple x-ray below my belly button to my pubis. $8,000. $8,000. What was the doctor's charge? $400.
Wow.
It's not the doctor that's causing the health care increase. The hospital made $7,500. on a single exam. No patient with Obamacare could afford that, okay? Because it might not be covered. Because at the time I had that study to look at my prostate and it hadn't been approved yet. Okay, so a patient in Obamacare might not have been allowed to have it. I was lucky. Okay, I had county government, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I think I might have even Medicare at the time. So it's a healthcare plan that covers some people, but there are millions who are not covered. Okay, and this deductibles thing is bad. There's the drug coverage. The Part D has this donut hole, which is incomprehensible, and these people that want to sell, well, you get to pick your own plan. You know, you manage your health care. The average person can't manage their health care. That's why doctors exist. How do you know what health care plan is best for you? Okay, because it's based on your current status. If all of a sudden you get a disease and now your Part D drug thing doesn't cover it, you've got to wait a year? That's absurd, okay? And there are a lot of people still in this country that are not college educated, that they can't understand these plans. They don't know how to select it. So you have to have one coverage for all, and it has to be from soup to nuts, okay? And there should be no deductible at all. There are many countries in this world that have that. And we need to do it here. But the almighty buck is what's ruling this. And almost every politician, including those in this county, are owned by the healthcare industry, especially the representative from the 10th Congress whose wife works in the healthcare field.
Then the coverage that is mentioned by the campaigners to be our president of the United States, they cannot guarantee that we're going to have affordable health care, right?
Are you talking about Bernie Sanders or the others?
Yeah, well...
Bernie Sanders is pushing Medicare for all.
Okay, now is he going to be able to afford that?
Is he what?
Is that affordable?
Let me ask you this. Do you know what we pay for our armed forces a year? No, you don't. Do you have a vote on it? You don't. It's in excess of $1 trillion a year. And a lot of that, some people claim, there's 50% that you don't know about because it has to do with the CIA and secret activities that you won't see because they can't put it on the books for what they do. I have a nephew who's a United States Colonel, Special Ops. He assassinates people for us. Okay? He goes behind the scenes and kills people. That's what you're not going to find out about. You're not going to find out about how he's paid. Okay? Because they don't want you to know. So if we can afford $1 trillion a year to kill people, I think we can afford that amount at least to cure people. Let me just say one more thing quickly. You see this, the news reports. Oh my God, healthcare is 19% of GNP. Does anyone, I almost said a bad word, anyone complain about the cost of your automobile? Okay, are we upset that we spend X dollars a year on cars? Healthcare provides a positive service. What's wrong with it being 19% when it employs people and it takes care of people? Okay? Yes, it's too high for the average citizen if it's 20% of what they take home. If you're making $30,000 and it's 20%, yeah, it's unaffordable. But don't make it sound like it's a negative service. What we need is to remove that percent from somebody's income and provide health care for all by giving away the socialistic tax benefits of major corporations, because we have socialism for corporation and capitalism for you and me. That's wrong.
Well, I have to leave some time in for another topic. We cover so many topics. I guess you should write a book. I don't know, you may be on the road to writing a book. But ethylene oxide.
Yes.
You want to,
Yes, I'm going to pull out my notes. I just have to do it. I want to do this right. I want
okay.
to congratulate and say that the people standing up for this are working their butts off, okay? Mm-hmm. They're fighting pollution of their environment, okay? This pollution is going to result in cancers. It already has.
It's been proven, no doubt
Right.
about that.
Okay, ethylene oxide is a very volatile gas. And when it's exposed in the environment, it lasts anywhere from 70 days to 150 days, depending on temperature. And it is originally used to make ethylene glycol, your antifreeze. That's the vast majority. However, they found out that it is good in killing bacteria. And so they have used it, they use it on medical equipment. And it's necessary for several reasons. Number one, medical equipment is no longer stainless steel only. It's plastic and other things. And so it's hard to radiate it. It's hard to dip it in bleach. Okay, it's very difficult. In the old days, you had surgical instruments, you threw them into the bleach, it killed it. Number two, we are over-medicating not only ourselves, but our animals. So we have virulent organisms out there that can't be killed the old way, so you need to do it this way, okay? That being said, it should not be put in a community with people around it. Get rid of it, move it out. If it's so necessary, get it out of the community. You have no right to make a profit and kill people around you, okay? So, they've been doing studies, and we know that it causes breast, stomach, and worse, blood, leukemia and lymphoma. This is terrible, terrible illnesses. And when you get this illness in a young age, and you are treated with drugs and radiation, guess what happens if you're cured? I'll tell you what happens when it's cured. You get another cancer 20 years from now.
Okay.
Because the agents they give you known to cause cancer. So we've had a system where, let me just tell you what happened. Through the work of Rita Mayfield and Representative Mason and Yingling and Bush and all the citizens, all the elected officials, they got a bill. They went before the Senate in November. And this is where the dirty politics got in. The bill it passed in the House.
Okay.
It should have went to the Environmental Committee, but all of a sudden it went to the Executive Committee. Why would you send a bill about protecting life and environment and send it to the Executive Committee? Why? Because that's where it died.
Okay.
And the people who voted it down don't live here. Okay? We've got one person from Chicago, one person from Aurora, one person from Oak Park, who don't have to worry about ethylene oxide in their communities. They said, well, we need more studies, we're not sure.
It's not in their zip code.
It's not in their zip code. This is a dangerous chemical. It needs to be removed from the public as soon as possible. Cost be damned. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have people working there who need to be protected also. Because they lose those jobs, they go under. Okay, so they have to be taken care of also. Okay, so you can start building a new factory somewhere else, out in the boonies, someplace where there is not a large number of people living, and get it out of Waukegan, get it out of Gurnee or Grays Lake. It's poisonous. It's going to cause cancer. It needs to stop. So we need to do something about it. This is not a joke. I think they shut it down at Willowbrook. Okay. What concerns me is, Dr. Brooks, is there's politics being played here. Politicians love to go and say, "Oh, we're going to help you," blah blah blah, and then when it comes to the vote, they make a deal. Okay. Because I think what we need to do is look up the donations given by the Illinois Manufacturing Association. Let's see where they're dumping money on this vote. Okay, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if some of the people that first said get rid of it didn't take some money to help knock it down. You've got a Democratic governor. You have a huge majority of Senate and House of Reps. Veto-proof. You got a Democratic governor, so you have to worry. You've got veto-proof House and Senate and a Democratic governor, and you can't pass that bill? Mm-hmm. Something's wrong. And I think it's dirty politics. I think money spoke. Money got dumped into the hands of certain elected officials. It needs to stop. It needs to stop.
Our you mentioned senator, and also our state rep is involved too in trying to, get this stopped.
Well, Rita was the major focus.
I say state rep, but congressional rep.
Well, our congressional rep got involved too. Snyder. Okay, but they didn't get rid of it. Hey, look, you come to me and say we support you, and then you leave. It's just like when people go to war. They have a parade. We're behind you, yay! All of a sudden, the guy's in a foxhole. Where are they?
Okay.
They said they're behind me. Words are cheap. Actions are better.
Well, is there a typical day for Dr. Rudd? Even though you're retired, it's still there. Is there a typical day?
All right. First thing I noticed when I got indicted, a number of lawyers called me up to review their cases. And I'm thinking, do you read the news? I'm indicted.
Okay.
You want to put an indicted? You want to use an indicted pathologist in your malpractice case? And all of them said, Dr. Rudd, we know that it is BS. We know it's a political action, and I guarantee you, if we go to court and they bring it up, we'll shoot it down. We'll crush it. And guess what? That's exactly what happens. They bring it up, they shoot it down. I've won every case I've accepted, we've won. Every case that they said, will you testify on behalf of our client in this malpractice, they've won. The only case I failed, and it's only because they didn't put me on the stand, was Howell. They were afraid to put me on the stand because of the indictment. And the sad thing is that the same day I got my plea bargained, the jury voted not guilty on the officer. Had the trial continued, I could have testified, but the Howell attorneys felt that an indicted coroner would not have done their case well, and that they were wrong, because, as I said before, I do work for attorneys on a case-by-case basis. I will only take cases that I think are worthwhile in terms of truthfulness and honesty. I will not take bogus cases. So I do some of that. Otherwise, I while the day away reading. I love reading. Okay, I love politics, and I think what was the Johnny Cash show? Johnny Cash song, "I Will Not Go Away." Something that I'm not going to go away. I'm going to speak the truth. I'm going to lay it out. I've let the Democrats know that a lot of them are traitors and backstabbers and treacherous individuals, and how they could treat me, a Democrat since 1998, this way. I've not only given time, but I've given money, and to treat me this way, it's wrong. Law of physics, what goes around comes around.
We've seen so many honest people like yourself just fade away because the politics just, and that's, but like you said, what goes around comes around, and it's all about, and I have never seen, and I repeat this all the time, a Brinks truck behind a hearse yet. Why are they trying to get all of the money and the hearse take them into the grave? They're going to leave it there.
Look, one of the things, we've got a few minutes, one of the things that the average citizen should do, go online to all your elected officials and look at their expenditures and the monies that come in. And what you will see, folks, is that very few people, individuals, give money to their elected official. And I think that's a good idea. Do not give money to elected officials. When I was an elected official, I turned the checks back. You don't want to give me any money. What you will see are corporations. Corporations are paying for everybody in this county. And guess what? When they leave, if they have $7 million, that's theirs. They get to keep it. So they're just building up a big pot of money so that when they finally get thrown out or leave, they're sitting on a pot of gold. Who do you think they're going to vote for? You or those corporations?
Okay. Senators and representatives, they have the best health care, you know. And I understand they only have to be in one term.
No. I can only speak for the county.
Okay.
In the old days, in the county, you had to win 2 elections and serve 8 years.
Okay.
Now they bumped it to 10. However, as I found out, when I was in college, I worked as a mental health aide part-time for 6 years. I got to use that towards my pension.
Okay.
So any time spent in a government office like state, county, or municipal can count towards this pension plan. Okay, but you're right. They used to get what the average factory worker got: great health care, great vacation, great time off. I mean, great sick days, benefits galore. They're the last of a defined benefit. Nobody else has that. They took it away. You got your 401k, which you can save money, but not as good, and you have to manage yourself. Okay.
Well, Dr. Rudd, thank you very much, and I sincerely appreciate you and our listening audience have been well benefited, you know, by your being on the program, and hopefully that God will take care of you. It's no doubt about that. He's taken care of you thus far, and I'm sure He's going to lead you on. You know, there are 3 types of people in the world. There's people that make things happen, those that watch things happen, and those that wonder what's happening. It appears that we got too many people in our zip codes. They're just wondering what's happening. And do you think when they see people that your own Democratic Party work against you, then they wonder about the effort that they should put in?
Correct.
But I would encourage them to keep voting, make sure they are registered to vote, and not only registered, but do vote in the upcoming elections.
It's the most important thing you can do, and very few people do it, and you get the government you deserve when you don't vote.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Dr. Thomas A. Rudd, former Lake County Coroner, 2012 through 2016. We've been talking about a variety of topics, and he's a person that you should know, and for many years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Community Forum. My name is Dr. Wandell Brooks Sr., your host.